make sure to give my dad a 5-star review.
Make sure to like and subscribe to his YouTube. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
And that is Jesus bringing about the fulfillment of the law that he talks about, where he fulfills the ancient Hebrew law rather than denigrates it, rather than quits it and says, now the law is this, because Jesus is all about transformation, not domination. He's not about being superior to anybody else. He's about being superior to your former self. And one of the great lessons of the Gospels, I think, that we need to remember is if you're going around arguing that you're better than some other group of people because you follow Jesus, bro, you don't really follow Jesus, and you haven't really read his book.
Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. Everyone watching on our YouTube channel, we are so glad to have you. I am your political host, Will Wright, and your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. Can't be here today. Something essential oils. I don't know what that guy's doing. But anyways, today in his place, or I shouldn't say in his place, we are delighted to have John Fugelsang, who is an actor, comedian, and broadcaster with one of the most eclectic resumes in the business. He is the first person that has ever been murdered on our show. Also been interviewed by
on CSI, only on CSI.
Yes. Oh, okay, got it. I just wanted to make sure that I'm not talking to like your body double. Is that a thing?
No, you can't afford I can't afford my body double. No worries.
Gotcha. Well, you've got a very, very impressive resume, and you also just wrote a book that's kind of making the airwaves, and you are everywhere. And we're so glad that you're able to come on our show to talk about separation of church and hate, where you dig into how scripture gets weaponized in our politics and what more compassionate, Jesus-shaped public faith could actually look like. So welcome to the show, John.
Will, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and happy Thanksgiving to all your audience.
Yeah, thank you. And so, okay, let's just get into it. So you wrote this book. You've been on all the airwaves. You're pushing it. You're making an impact. I learned about your book because one of our audience of the show, or one of the people that listens to our show, like sent it to me and said, hey, you should talk to this guy. And I'm like, okay. So I bought the book, which is very weird for me because most of the times I get like those advanced reading copies. So like to actually spend hard-earned money on a book.
I would have sent you one. Will.
It's okay. This is before I had even like tried to look you up to find your email. I was like, you know what? I enjoy this because I rarely get a chance to really like connect with the books of the authors that write them because I kind of like speed read. But it's a great book. And I've already recommended to other people that are wondering about this little space that we're in with faith and politics. So I'm gonna stop there and just ask you to just tell us what the book is about and why did you write it?
Sure. Thank you so much. This book is for any believer of any faith, any atheist, any agnostic, anyone of any belief system who's ever going to have to deal with a far right-wing authoritarian Christian nationalist or fundamentalist in their families, in their schools, in their local governments, on the school board, in their national government. It's a guide to how to use the Bible when debating a right-wing Christian. Because like millions, I was raised to believe that Christianity was about the stuff Christ talked about. Humility, love, forgiveness, going to the margins, fighting for the least of us. The way you treat the lowest of us is how you treat Jesus. I was raised by parents who were maybe a bit more inside baseball than other Christians. My mother was a nun for 16 years. She was a nurse, and the convent sent her to Africa to work with lepers, and then in a hospital in Malawi. My dad was a Franciscan brother. He taught history to Catholic boys in Brooklyn, and he wore the belt and the brown robes like a lost Jedi Knight. And my dad was in love with this nun for about 10 years, couldn't say anything, finally got her to leave and go on a date. And they raised us to believe that Christianity was about Christ. Matthew 25, Jesus gives his marching orders, the judgment of nations, also known as the parable of the goats and the sheep. That's where Yeshua says he's going to judge individuals and nations based on 4 basic criteria. And it's different translations, but you know this. When I was hungry and you gave me food, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Jesus says individuals and nations alike will be gathered at the end times, and he's going to judge them on how you took care of the poor, how you took care of the sick, how you welcomed the stranger, and how kind you were to people who were in prison. And that's it. Jesus doesn't say anything about how much you pray or how loudly you pray in public or how much money you give your church or how much you hate liberals or how much you scream at women outside clinics or how much you persecute trans kids or foreigners. Care for the poor, care for the sick, welcome the stranger, and be kind to those in prison. So, I grow up like millions to find this religion of peace and love and empathy and fellowship has seemingly been hijacked by this overwhelmingly white, rather historically white supremacist, right-wing, pro-talking about Jesus, anti-following his teachings, mean little tax-free clique. And so many people feel like this religion has been hijacked. When you were growing, if you grew up in the late 20th century and you turned on the TV news, you would see people like Jerry Falwell, a racist segregationist who opened up whites-only schools, Pat Robertson, who said 9/11 was God's punishment for allowing gay people. You'll see these people presented as the Christian leaders. And they didn't talk like any Christian leaders I'd ever heard. These so-called TV Christian leaders didn't talk about helping the poor, helping the sick. They talked about welfare moms. They talked about feminists being evil and abortion. And that was really their grand bargain. After segregation failed, after Nixon failed, after the Voting Rights Act passed, the segregationists spent a whole decade in the 70s trying to figure out how to get their mojo back, and they finally did it with this issue of abortion, which the Bible is not against, which Judaism never bans. At no point does God or the prophets or Christ or Moses or Paul ever say men should force women to be pregnant against their will. I'm not saying it's pro-abortion, but I'm saying the Bible never bans the practice of ending a pregnancy, never offers any kind of punishment for it. Jesus is very against the death penalty, but nothing about abortion. And yet it didn't matter. It worked. For 2 generations now, 45 years, they've managed to get, in America, to get the followers of Jesus to vote against everything Jesus ever talked about by talking about abortion, which Jesus never talked about. So I wrote this book for everybody who just has a hard time understanding how this movement of peace and love and empathy could be so hijacked into such a mean, corrosive vehicle for a guy like Donald Trump, whose entire life is just wagging his junk at the gospel teachings of Jesus. And it's a guide for how on every single point that divides us in this culture, from LGBTQ rights to women's reproductive freedoms to feminism to gun policy, healthcare policy, how we treat the poor, sex hang-ups, on almost every issue that divides us, Jesus is probably on your side if you're debating a right-wing Christian nationalist. Even if you're atheist, even if you don't believe in Jesus, he's probably on your side. The Democratic Party has given up on trying to use the Bible. They've just ceded it over to the Republicans, who, again, don't fight for anything Jesus actually talked about. And the media is terrified to ever ask any tough follow-up questions. I never saw the media say, hey, Mike Pence, where does Jesus drive the gay wedding cakes out of the temple? So it's going to be up to all of us to convince everyone that hate is not a Christian value. That's a very long preaching answer to a very short, simple question.
No, I actually love it, and I think your response is very reminiscent to like your writing style. And like, truth be told, I got the audio version, so like hearing your voice, actually, like, because you're the one that actually reads it, it's really kind of weird. It's like, you've been listening to this thing for hours on end, and then all of a sudden the person's in front of you.
I actually really I love the audiobook because I'm not a real writer. I'm a performer. Mm-hmm. So when I was first trying to write this, I would read it to my wife, and she'd be like, "I'm bored. It's not funny. You're trying to sound smarter than you really are." My wife was like, "You're trying to sound like one of the professors or clergy you interview on your show." And she was right. I was trying to pass myself off as a writer, and I'm not. So I had to read every line of this out loud because I had to find the voice, right? And, we all have a lot of different voices in us. And the voice for this book was a guy on a bar stool tugging on your coat about hypocrites and what's actually in the Bible. And I don't pretend to be an expert. I ask everyone to doubt me and look up everything I say, cross-reference it with Scripture. Don't automatically believe me. That's how you know I'm not trying to sell you religion. And so in that sense, it was like, once I found the voice, it was easy because the audiobook was the most fun part. I will admit, I don't listen to a lot of audiobooks. I had no idea what a dominant part of book sales it is, but I'm a performer, so I write things to perform them. I can tell you I enjoyed performing this book in front of a microphone a lot more than I enjoyed writing it. That's
so funny, and I see a lot of my journey just in podcasting and just your statement, I've only been podcasting for 5 years, and like, who am I and who's Josh? Like, we're nobodies, right? So like we came
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, but I get where you're going. Go on.
Yeah. Like we didn't come into this world with any particular expertise. We're just Democrat and Republican, wanted to sort of exemplify what we thought Jesus would want us to do, right? So like we
But that
started
alone,
podcasts.
where do you see that on TV, Will? Where do you see that on corporate media? Anywhere, what you guys are doing? I mean, think about it.
Yeah. Although, like it's funny, Josh and I were just talking about like, man, like there's really no money in like civility. Like you have to have that certain like,
yes.
I don't know. Like that,
You're explaining Donald Trump right now. Yeah.
and I'm just like in Trump's like in 2019, majority of the episodes that we did that did well were about Trump, and we're just like, I don't want to be a Trump podcast, like he is
but he's a useful device to jump off from. I mean, you can learn a lot about Christianity by studying the exact opposite of everything Jesus tells us to do. I mean, I ask the MAGA friends all the time and my family members, like, yeah, because I believe in getting along with these folks, but I'll tell them, give me one actual teaching of Jesus, one gospel teaching of Christ that this guy or his movement fight for. You know what? Give me one gospel teaching of Christ the Republican Party has fought for in the 21st century. Chapter and verse. If you ask that question, you'll find out pretty quickly how little these folks know the actual Bible. Because they don't have any Jesus quotes, any Jesus teachings or commandments. A lot of these folks put up a tree in their house and hate Muslims and think that's all there is to it. But the number one answer I get is abortion. And I'm like, well, the Bible's not against abortion. Jesus is against the death penalty, but I guess you think he's wrong about that. Number two thing I'll get is strong border. And that's when I have to say, no, the God of the Old Testament commands us to welcome the stranger. God commands the Israelites to treat the alien as one of your own. And his son Jesus comes along and says individuals and nations will be judged, heaven or hell, by how they welcome the stranger. And this is sort of what my book is all about, because if you have this particular person in your life, you don't need to fight them. You can let them fight with God. Just say, the Old Testament says this, the New Testament says this. Why should I listen to you and Donald Trump and reject the direct orders of God and Jesus? I mean, where is the Christ-based argument for how ICE is treating people?
It's true. Yeah. I mean, like the Bible has been used to both oppress and liberate for as long, time memoriam. And it's like, I like to believe I'm sort of the liberate, like Bible reading type, but I know like there may be some things I believe in that others might feel are oppressive to myself, not to them, because I try to really internalize a lot of my faith and not have it like beat somebody over the head with. So,
amen. Good for you. Yeah.
So it's just like where's that middle line? Like for most Americans, and how do we know when we've overstepped it?
What's the middle? I mean, what's the middle line for me? Like we can't hate people, especially if they hate us. We can't hate them back. These people aren't zealots. They're not nationalists. In many cases, they're our loved ones. They're our family or our coworkers or that guy from high school we're still friends with on Facebook who can't spell your correctly and posts all the Trump stuff. Like we can't hate these people back. But in a democracy, we have to beat them. So I don't know where the middle line is. There's the stuff Jesus actually talks about, and there's the stuff y'all fight for. And I'm not saying open borders amnesty. That was Ronald Reagan. But it's the criminalization of migrants. I mean, I don't call these people illegals. I call them Christian refugees. And again, there's no Old Testament or New, they'll fall back on Paul's letter to Romans saying, oh, respect the governing authorities. That's always their go-to line because they don't follow Jesus. They follow Paul, like most right-wing people. Jesus is too woke, so they'll go with his right-wing PR guy. And, after Jesus died, Jesus' actual followers were all being knocked off by Paul's friends, right? When he was still Saul of Tarsus, and he was there for the martyring of St. Stephen, the first Christian martyr. But then Saul had his conversion, and because Paul was a Roman citizen and a Pharisee, he could travel all over the Roman Empire. So while Paul's old buddies were murdering Jesus' actual friends and apostles back home, he got to go around the Roman Empire and sell his version. He'd never met Jesus. He had this vision when Jesus is a Force ghost or something. But Saul sold his version, which is like, well, it's like Judaism, but hey, you keep your foreskin and have some bacon and it's eternal forgiveness. And it was incredibly popular. The Roman Empire took over. And the version of Christianity we have is not the apostles. It's this guy who never met Jesus. It's Paul. And when the Roman Empire chose at the Council of Nicaea to decide what was the Bible and what wasn't, and they put Paul's letters about Holy Scripture into the Bible, suddenly Paul, his letters to his friends, as he's trying to set up the church and, address their problems in different regions, and he's writing to them about Holy Scripture, well, now that is suddenly Holy Scripture. And this begins 1,700 years of people taking Paul talking about God to believe that Paul's talking for God. So again, Jesus is totally anti-homophobia, but Paul has hang-ups, so they go to Paul. And it's in the New Testament. Jesus treats women as equals, but Paul has hang-ups and says they should be submissive, so they go to Paul. They totally ignore the teachings of Christ. And, I say in the book, this is like if you suddenly decided that Roger Ebert's review of The Godfather is now officially part of The Godfather's original script. So they're still following Paul all these years later, and it's Paul who said, respect the governing authorities. He said that to Rome, who eventually killed him anyway. It didn't save him. But he was just saying, you're in Rome, so don't get yourself killed. But you notice our Christian right-wing brothers and sisters, they don't say respect the governing authorities when the president has a D after his name. I didn't hear too much about respecting the governing authorities under President Obama or President Biden or to any governing authorities who aren't part of the Republican Party. Because again, right-wing Christianity is not about Jesus at all. It's not about God. It's not about fighting Satan. It's not about religious freedom. It's about conservative Christian control over society and government and culture. That's it. That's what they fight for. And the politicians know it. I mean, if they wanted to have the abortion rate go down, you'd have birth control more accessible. You'd have sex ed in schools. No, they want the controversy to get power. You want people to stop crossing the border? Simple, make a law. You hire an undocumented immigrant, go to jail for a year. They'd stop crossing the border right away. Start locking up white folks for hiring all these nannies and construction workers. They don't want to. They need to exploit the controversy for power. That's the whole racket. The Christ followers are always the ones who stand up to this, who stand up for the marginalized, who stand up for the least of us. If you're aligning with power and punching down, well, in Christianity and comedy, it doesn't work.
Yeah, what's interesting is my confidence in the government. This is going to sound very antithetical, but like my confidence in the government actually went up around COVID only because in a short amount of time we were able to develop this vaccine. And I've always long believed, like, when the government really wants to do something,
Look, in 2021 under Joe Biden, we achieved the lowest rate of childhood poverty in the history of the country because we chose to. And then we got rid of the tax credit and it went up again. But we've shown we can do it if we want. I mean, Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security showed when we want to keep old folks from starving or suffering because they can't see a doctor, we can fix that.
And Epstein files. I mean, we can get like a 400 to whatever, Clay Higgins, like vote. And I'm just like, come on, people. Like, if we wanted to fix like people that are on house, if we want to fix I'm a veteran, and like my veteran care is horrendous. Right. And I'm like,
if we wanted to, we could do it.
Absolutely. I'm curious, John, is it a lonely place to be a comedian and like left-leaning individual and a believer? Like, no. I don't know Hollywood enough to know like how hard it is.
No. Listen, I first off, your beliefs, even if they're not popular, don't have to be the thing that makes you lonely. I mean, when my dad retired down south, he would never join the Democratic Party. He was too liberal. He was always an independent. But he was also the most Catholic guy I ever knew. And he never, my dad was like Zoran with Trump. He never compromised his values, never put a sock on his morality. He always talked to his Southern neighbors and friends and co-parishioners from the Gospels, the teachings of Jesus, and showing how Jesus' teachings aligned a lot more with FDR and LBJ than Ronald Reagan. And, folks didn't know what to do with my dad. But I'll tell you this, when he died, there were more Republicans at his funeral than Democrats. So for me, it can be lonely if you're a comedian talking about this. Like in the past few years, I've put myself in a very niche position, I guess. I've focused on politics more and more. It's just where I felt drawn to. I hosted America's Funniest Home Videos for a couple of years. Like, I've tried the mainstream thing, and it didn't feel very honest to me. So I think it's a lot lonelier to try to be something you're not for the sake of material comfort.
That makes total sense. And I'm curious, like, what was the breaking point for you though? Like the moment of realization where you're like, what I thought I knew about the relationship between faith and politics does not really seem to be the relationship I understood.
Great question.
Because I mean, I've asked this question to a lot of people, like Kristen Stewart, like hers was like the, oh man, I'm going to totally screw it up.
Catherine Stewart from the Power Worshippers.
Catherine Stewart. Yeah. Thank you.
Love her. Love Kristen Stewart too, by the way. Great Princess Diana movie. Really underrated.
well, it's like the Catherine Stewart's origin story has to do with like, her kids at the school. And then there's like this, man, like the Babysitters Club, some sort of club. It's escaping me. But it's like she recognized that there's something amiss here, and you talk to like Tim Alberta, and he's just like, yeah, this church that my dad went to is whoa, like, and I'm just like, everybody seems to have an origin story when it comes to something is not right. So I'd love to just know, like, what's your origin story?
I mean, mine's a bit different. I was, like I said, abnormally Catholic, mom being a nun, dad being a Franciscan, and I grew up around clergy all the time. And my dad's friends were all ex-brothers. And then my mom became a head nurse at a convent for retired nuns in her own order. So suddenly, like my house is filled with like elderly nuns from all around the world, many of whom had known my mother when her name had been Damien. Like, to me, it seemed normal. I was baptized in my parents' living room by a Catholic priest my mother had known in the jungles of Africa. It seemed... Some kids got piano lessons. I got organ lessons. It seemed very normal at every holy day. I mean, my God, never missing Mass my entire life. But over time, I began to recognize the disconnect between the teachings of Jesus and the Christian authority figures I saw. The first thing came to me when I guess it first happened when I realized, fire can't hurt a ghost. And that destroyed my childish idea of what hell was. Right? Like, fire can't hurt a ghost. How can physical flames hurt a spirit? Right? Like, you don't have a nervous system anymore. No.
They're really hot. I
mean, yeah, I get it. And then, you research a bit and you learn about, Sheol, what was the original Hebrew concept of hell, and it's more about separation from God. Then it was when I realized that my church believed that the Virgin Mary was unworthy of saying Mass. That my church believed that God made 51% of the population unfit to be a priest. And my grandmother was a strong Southern woman. My mother was a strong Southern woman. And by my teens, I was really wrestling with this whole notion of no knob, no job. And you read the Gospels and you see how Jesus treats women as equals, how Jesus elevated women, how women financed Jesus' actual ministry. They never teach you that. They never teach you about Susanna or how Mary Magdalene, who wasn't a prostitute, actually helped subsidize Jesus' whole operation. And then you learn that there were three women, Magdalene and Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, that went everywhere with Jesus and were always with him. And they were the only ones who didn't bail on him when he was arrested. They were the first ones he comes back to. And you're like, well, there were 15 apostles. And the men who wrote it said, no, there's 12 apostles and 3 groupies. And I couldn't reconcile it. And I still can't. It's male control of population and weaponizing women's biology against themselves. And then by the time I was 13, the homophobia thing. I was working at a regional theater, and I was a 13-year-old boy in the 80s, so I was homophobic. That was normal. And one day I was talking the way 13-year-old boys did in the 80s, and a dear, dear man I loved, who was a wardrobe designer, and I didn't know was gay because I was 13. I didn't know half the men I loved were gay, told me to shut up. And I got the crap slapped out of me verbally by a gay costume designer who straightened me out. And I realized, oh my God, he's gay, and I love them. I'm a dick. And no one ever taught me that whole business in Leviticus, lie with a man as with a woman, well, that's not Jesus. Leviticus does not apply. Leviticus is God's instructions for the Hebrews when they're escaping captivity in Egypt, and they don't realize they're going to be stuck in the wilderness for 40 years with no refrigeration or Wi-Fi access or antibiotics. Half of those rules are about keeping the tribe's numbers up and staying faithful to God. So there's no sex on your period, no incest, no bestiality, no men hooking up with men. It's all about keeping the numbers up. They don't ever say any actual instances where they ever stoned a guy to death for being with a guy. There's no record of it ever happening. These were just the rules for the Hebrews. And again, it calls for you to stone to death adulterers in Leviticus 20:10. So these homophobes aren't throwing any rocks at Donald Trump. It's almost like they don't really believe what's in this book. They're just picking and choosing one line to weaponize it to hurt a minority Christ commands them to love. And I didn't know as a kid that Jesus brought a new covenant. That's why you can eat bacon, Gentiles. Jesus has a whole new covenant. And he shifts from law 1.0 to love 1.0. And to call yourself Christian is to accept the new terms and conditions. That's why the whole Sermon on the Mount is Jesus saying it was said this, but I say this. It was eye for an eye, but I'm telling you, it's turn the other cheek. It was don't hate a brother or sister. I'm telling you, don't hate an enemy. And that is Jesus bringing about the fulfillment of the law that he talks about, where he fulfills the ancient Hebrew law rather than denigrates it, rather than quits it and says, now the law is this, because Jesus is all about transformation, not domination. He's not about being superior to anybody else. He's about being superior to your former self. And one of the great lessons of the Gospels, I think, that we need to remember is if you're going around arguing that you're better than some other group of people because you follow Jesus, bro, you don't really follow Jesus, and you haven't really read his book.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I always keep coming back to. We've talked to a lot of people who have like deconstructed folks like April LaJoy, Brian Recker, even Sarah McCammon. She wrote a book. She reported for NPR, and it's like the one question I always come back to is like, wow, you've like laid out this entire story, this entire narrative, reasons of why you've kind of reached this point of deconstruction, but yet you still believe. So like, why Jesus?
Yeah, right. I love it.
Why Jesus? And it sounds like, you know, your ability to kind of just summarize current events and really articulate them in a way that makes sense to just normal people like me, I think is quite the skill. But also it shows that you're in tune with kind of what's going on, and yet you're still a believer. So why? Like, why Jesus?
Well, again, you know, there's that great line in the movie The Last Jedi where Mark Hamill, as an old Luke Skywalker, says, the Jedi don't own the Force, and religion doesn't own God. Organized religion does not own faith or belief or Jesus or the Bible or God or you. And belief in Creator, following the commander-in-chief, following the teachings of Christ, having that spiritual life, well, that doesn't necessarily need to have anything to do with organized religion if you really want to get technical about it. The Bible doesn't tell us to follow the Bible. The Bible tells us to follow Christ. And, you know, if you realize that you're outgrowing your church, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a sinner or a bad person. It may mean that God is calling you forward on your spiritual journey. My mom and dad made a promise to God when they joined the clergy. And they gave up their names and their chastity. They gave up their freedoms. And then they felt a new spiritual calling. That's Jesus, right? Like Jesus is all about transformation. My dad always said the same love that drew him into a life of service with the Franciscans eventually led him out of it to marriage and kids and working and having that whole experience. And so I just view the entire thing as supposed to be about transformation, not we're better than you. But again, that's the seductive lure of Christian nationalism. That's how Donald Trump got these folks. He didn't run for president. He didn't capture the evangelical vote by promising to do what Christ commands. Have you ever heard him talk about Christ or the Gospels or the actual teachings of Jesus? Have you ever seen a Republican politician in your lifetime fight to put any teachings of Jesus on a courthouse wall or a classroom wall? They don't. Trump got them by saying, I'm going to put you first. You're under siege. He played up the persecution narrative. You're under siege. Oh, you should be running everything. I'm going to put you first. And that's a very seductive message. It's also the opposite of Jesus. He wasn't about being in the anointed group. He was about pick up your cross and follow me. It's going to be hard. When Jesus says, I came to bring a sword, he's not talking about a weapon for literal bloodshed. He's saying, if you choose to follow my ministry of fighting for the least of us, it's going to cost you something. You're going to lose family and friends. It's not easy to walk this path. It's much more comfortable to just be in power and assume God likes you better because you're in the right God fan club. It's not that easy. It's really messy. And so when people are deconstructing, I mean, it doesn't mean you don't have a spiritual life. And so many of us, just because you no longer subscribe to any official religion doesn't mean you're not still in love with the great mystery. It doesn't mean that Christ can't be a real thing for you, a source of inspiration, whether he's divine and magical or just a really cool guy or an activist or the original innocent brown-skinned man executed by the state. I mean, it's all about your relationship with the commander-in-chief and how much love and grace and support and kindness we can bring to others during our brief time on this earth. It's not about domination. And that's usually how you can tell a fake Christian from a Christ follower.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about Peter, especially like in that scene when the Romans came to arrest Jesus, and Peter's out there cutting off ears, like Mike Tyson style. And like Jesus is like, whoa, 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 whoa. And like in my mind, I'm envisioning like Peter's like, oh, I thought this is what we're doing. Like I thought this was the move, but Jesus is like, no, like pump the brakes, pump the hate brakes, like I need to heal this ear real fast, and like that's how we treat our enemies,
Right,
like
but look at what Jesus said. That's in Luke's account, but in Matthew's account, he says, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. But look how they weaponize it. In the Luke's account, Luke 22, right before they come to arrest him, Jesus talks about how we have to fulfill a prophecy. Isaiah prophesies that we would be numbered with the transgressors. We have to be criminals. I have to get arrested. So go sell your cloak and buy a sword because we need them as props to be criminals. And the apostles say, well, actually, Jesus, we already have 2 swords on us. And Jesus goes, oh, that's enough. And then they come to arrest him. And Jesus is like, don't fight back. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And he voluntarily goes. He refuses to let them practice self-defense. So what do the right-wing people do? Will. They take one line from Luke 22. Sell your cloak and buy a sword. And that is used to justify letting mentally, emotionally unstable 20-something white males buy products that are designed to kill lots of human beings really fast. You talk about stewardship. You talk about protecting the less fortunate and taking care of God's creation and making it harder for disturbed people to murder lots of God's chosen at the same time. And they will call you a communist. And the right one will say, Luke 22, Jesus said, sell your cloak and buy a sword. And people literally carve this on their weapons, Luke 20. They don't carve the Matthew version where he says, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Because again, they pick and choose parts of books they don't follow to serve themselves, to make their lives more comfortable. They like cool shit you can kill people with. They like civilians getting lots of weapons and the mentally unstable people murdering because then you sell more guns and you yell at liberals, and this is the side they've chosen. 90% of us supported expanded background checks after Sandy Hook. That's more of us than like Christmas. Barack Obama couldn't get an up or down vote. They go against the teachings of Christ by taking lines of scripture out of context and weaponizing them for their own power and benefit. The Democrats are never going to call this out. The media is never going to call out the fake Christians. It's up to us. We can do it without hatred by talking about what Jesus actually says. Again, and not trying to hate them back, but we have to beat them. And if you're going to walk around trying to get political power and claiming that you think that abortion should be criminalized, that American citizens should be forced by the government to be pregnant against their will, that men should be allowed to force a 14-year-old pregnant rape victim to be pregnant against her will by her stepdad because you're so Christian, even though Christ never mentioned abortion. But you're going to support murdering prisoners via the death penalty, strapping a guy to a table and filling him with poison till he's dead. And Jesus actually opposed the death penalty. Then if that's where you stand, why are the rest of us ever obliged to take your claims of piety seriously? These guys use the Bible as camouflage, and I wrote Separation of Church and Hate to be a camouflage removal guide.
Yeah, I am curious, and you would probably have very unique insight about this because whenever I talk to journalists, reporters, I just spoke with Jack Jenkins recently. He worked for a religion news service, and
right on.
Great organization, great guy. He was saying that there just aren't enough religious reporters out there. He's like, New York Times has like one, and Washington Post has like one, Michelle Borstein,
and what is that? By the way, what does religious mean too? I mean, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of people call themselves religious and they support Donald Trump, having cops beaten on the Capitol steps for a lie.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, that's a good question, because in my mind, I'm thinking like a religious reporter would be somebody that understands at least like the history somewhat. Like if you're going to have a conversation about school vouchers, with the Department of Education going away, and then they want to expand school vouchers, like I think a good, well-informed religious reporter would know the history about that.
Yeah, but you're right. That doesn't exist. I mean, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, but why?
Why? When have you? Every time we're about to bomb some country, they always bring on, the retired general. They never bring on the priest or the nuns who are for peace, right? Like you never see the guys talking about helping the poor on TV. What do we get? We get the fundamentalists. We get the haters, because they're the ones ruining every religion. The more to the right you are, it doesn't matter what religion, but the more the right you are in any religion, they're all the same. Right-wing, extremist, fundamentalist, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus. It's all the same. Number one, women are always second-class citizens. The more to the right your religion is, it doesn't matter the religion. Women are second-class. You got all the sex hang-ups about gay people or women having sex. Violence is okay if my side doesn't, right? I mean, every religion, the more to the right you are, the rules, my holy book about not killing others doesn't apply to me. The more to the right your religion is, there's always a focus on punishment instead of healing. And the more to the right your religion is, there's always this incessant persecution narrative, right? That we're so set upon, that we've been treated so badly, so we're allowed to be cruel to others. This is fundamentalism. And these are the guys who get on TV. You don't see the millions and millions of moderate and liberal Christians, Jews, and Muslims who are getting along right now all over the world, in families, making businesses, in schools together, in local governments together. You don't see the ones getting along because that's boring. It's the douchebags hurting people. That's what gets the clicks. That's what gets the eyeballs. That's what gets the attention. And that's why you see the right-wingers, the fundamentalists, growing up the Jerry Falwells and the Pat Robertsons. They're great villains and TV programs for clicks and ratings. So does the news. Someone talking about helping the poor? Who's going to watch that? Who's going to give any ratings for that? How do we charge more to sell diapers and airtime if you're talking about helping the less fortunate? And so this informs the religion. So that's why you'll see these journalists having a religious segment, and they'll talk about, well, but anti-gay is the Christian point of view. I say, where the hell is that? Not according to Christ, who's never anti-gay. Well, Christianity is the anti-abortion view. Where the hell does anyone in the Bible ban abortion or say what the penalty for ending a pregnancy should be? Like, you're right. It's not. They don't know the history. And they're so afraid of ever appearing that dreaded word biased that they're actually biased towards nonsense. They're biased towards conjecture. They're not biased towards facts, because the facts are you're allowed to fight to ban abortion and gay marriage. You're not allowed to claim you're doing it for Jesus.
Yeah, which, I mean, it seems like one of the things I talked about with John Jenkins when I mentioned him, as I said, it seems like people that follow Christian nationalism and Christian sort of like political news are always at the forefront of predicting what's going to happen next on the national media stage. Like the debate about the Department of Education being abolished or vouchers,
right?
Like that was a debate that was had after Brown v. Board Education,
Yeah.
and it's grown louder and louder and louder until like today. And I'm just like, you could do the same thing. Like you could do with the Obergefell stuff,
Sure.
the Kim Davis, it had roots in Loving v. Virginia.
Yes, it did. Oh, yes, it did.
And you're just like, why is it that it's so hard for the media, especially, to kind of like connect the dots, or at least just make their audience a little bit more educated?
No, because media and journalism are not the same thing. And the job of journalism is to tell the truth, and the job of media is to generate a profit for shareholders. Right?
Yeah, it's sad to even think that way.
Well, I mean, there's lots,
But it's true,
but there's
right?
lots of great journalists working in corporate media. Lots of great journalists. But at the end of the day, there's a status quo that has to get served. And that's why the amazing thing about Jesus is his teachings are just as threatening to power, authoritarian power now, as they were 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, So I can keep talking to you forever, but
Well, I hope I pass the audition. I get to come back and talk to both of you sometime.
You did. Actually, Josh had told me I need you to screen John first to make sure that he's okay. I'll re-listen to the episode to make sure he's good. No, but
Josh, if you're listening, I know I sound very scary. I know. Oh, I'm like Zoran Mamdani unhinged. He's leftist. Oh no.
So my last question for you is more of a question of hope. We live in a dark time, and it seems like it's getting increasingly ever darker, especially with regards to this relationship of faith and politics. So, I'd love for you to kind of give us a vision of what does a healthier relationship between faith and public life look like, 10, 20 years from now.
I mean, it's my dream. I would love a government based on Christian values. I would. I support a separation of church and state. I think the founders were really smart in making our official religion all and or none. It was a very, very important factor in helping this country get on its feet economically with other countries that might be different to say, oh, no. I mean, that's why we say in the Treaty of Tripoli, ratified by Washington, signed by Adams, the government of the U.S. is in no way founded on the Christian religion, right? You know it. You're smarter than me. So, I'm all in favor of separation of church and state. But at the same time, we can still have a government based on the values of Christ. Jesus didn't have democracy, but we do. So if you believe in the teachings of Jesus, that we have a duty to help the poor and help the sick and be kind to those who are incarcerated and be kind to the stranger, well, guess what? We, unlike Jesus, get to vote for people whose policies are closer to the actual teachings of Christ, if that's really what you want. A lot of folks don't want the actual teachings of Christ. They want the teachings of their particular conservative Jesus fan club, which generally are about us being on top and have nothing to do whatsoever with the commandments of the Nazarene. But as awful as it may seem, and economically, I'll be the first to say we've been getting worse since the late 70s, early 80s, but I'm not an optimist, Will. I'm a recovering cynic. And if you had told me in the 90s that in 30 years, we would have marriage equality, that a Ronald Reagan Supreme Court appointee would write the majority opinion enshrining marriage equality, if you had told me that we would have a black president in the 1990s, if you had told me that we would not be putting people in jail for cannabis anymore in the 1990s, I would not have believed it. And yet look how far we've come. So, I grew up in the 80s and I was a teenager during the AIDS crisis when people were terrified. I mean, the media spread so much disinformation. You could get fired from your job for being gay. People were so terrified of catching this death virus. We saw the churches lead in cruelty, and we saw churches lead in acceptance and love and grace. And it was an amazing moment to decide which side of that equation you might want to be on. And for me, that's what really radicalized me. And look what happened. The gay people came out of the closet. They stopped waiting for help. They stopped waiting for the government to give them rights and began demanding it. Along with their straight allies, we all learned a lot. There was a lot of protests. There were protests that made me very uncomfortable as a teenage Catholic. I was not down with everything ACT UP did. It really rattled me, but that was the job of it, right? And what happened because of all that activism? The swiftest advancement of civil rights for any minority group in history. And again, gay people are a minority group inside every minority group. And America led the way. And it happened because of a plague that killed so many people. So all that bleakness taught me that anything is possible, and any kind of beauty and grace can come from all kinds of tragedy.
Wow, that was really powerful, John. Where can people follow you, buy your book? Go ahead and market yourself.
Sure. I'm sorry that I just froze. There we go. Hi. So I host the primetime programming on the SiriusXM Insight channel every night, 9 to midnight, if that's too late for you. 9 to midnight Eastern, 6 to 9. We're drive time for all the hipsters in LA. If that's too late for you, we are a free podcast. If you don't have SiriusXM, the John Fugelsang podcast, that's every day. And my book is called Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalist Fascists and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. It's on sale right now. It makes a great gift, not for conservatives. Buy it for people who live with conservatives. And I have a Substack, and I'm on all the socials at John Fugelsang. And Will, this has been such a pleasure for me. I'd love to come back anytime. Thank you for what you're doing. and thank both of you, even though Josh isn't here, for showing that we can come together with our brothers and sisters we disagree with and still make something positive.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. That really does mean a lot. We don't get a lot of feedback, and we're not huge because we do like zero marketing. People just come on.
You're still starting up. Why don't you guys? Yeah. You know what? Let's get you both on my show sometime, and we'll get some of our riffraff to subscribe to you.
All right. Hey, I love it. Well, thanks again, John, for everything. This has been absolutely phenomenal. And thank to our audience. Yeah, thank you for stopping by again. And as always, make sure you keep your conversations not right or left, but up. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Peace.